Part 5, Chapter 21 of the Manxman. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Manxman by Sir Caine, Part 5, Chapter 21. Granny came to Elm Cottage next morning with 2 duck eggs for Pete's breakfast. She was boiling them in a saucepan when Pete came downstairs. "Come now," she said coaxingly as she laid them on the table with the water smoking off the shells. But Pete could not eat. "He hasn't destroyed any food these days," said Nancy. A little before she had rolled her apron, slipped out into the street, and brought back a tiny packet screwed up in a bit of newspaper. "Perhaps he'll ate them on the road," said Granny. "I'll put them in the handkerchief in his hat anyway." "My faith, no, woman," cried Nancy. "He's the mischief for sweating. He'll be mopping his forehead and forgetting the eggs. But here, where's your waistcoat pocket, Pete? Have you room for a hayseed anywhere? There. It's a quarter of twist, poor boy," she whispered behind her hand to Granny. Thus they vied with each other in little attentions to the downhearted man. Meantime Crow, the driver of the Douglas coach, a merry old sinner with a bulbous nose and short hair, standing erect like the steel pins of an electric brush, was whistling as he put his horses to in the marketplace. Presently he swirled round the corner and drew up at the gate. The women then became suddenly quiet and put their aprons to their mouths, as if a hearse had stopped at the door. But Pete bustled about and shouted boisterously to cover the emotion of his farewell. "Goodbye, Granny. I'll say a word for you when I get there. Goodbye, Nancy. I'll not be forgetting yourself neither. Goodbye, lil bogh," dropping on one knee at the side of the cradle. "What right has a man's heart to be going losing him while he has a little innocent like this to live for? Goodbye." There was a throng of women at the gate talking of Kate. "Oh, a civil person, very. A civiller person never was." "It's me that'll be missing her too. I served her eggs to the day of her death, as you might say." "Good morning, Christian Anne," says she, just like that. "Welcome, you say? I was at home at the woman's door." "And the beautiful she came home in the gig with the baby. Only yesterday, you might say. And now, Lord a massy." "Hush, it's himself. I'm fit enough to cry when I look at the man. The cheerful heart is broke at him. Hush." They dropped their heads so that Pete might avoid their gaze, and held the coach door open for him, expecting that he would go inside as to a funeral. But he saluted them with "Good morning, all," and leapt to the box seat with Crow. The coach stopped to take up the Deemster at the gate of Ballure House. Philip looked thin and emaciated, and walked with a death-like weakness, but also a feverish resolution. Behind him, carrying a rag, came Auntie Nan in her white cap, with little nervous attentions and a face full of anxiety. "Drive inside today, Philip," she said. "No, no," he answered, and kissed her, pushed her to the other side of the gate with gentle protestation, and climbed to Pete's side. Then the old lady said, "Good morning, Peter. I'm so sorry for your great trouble, and trust. But you'll not let the Deemster ride too long outside if it grows. He's had a sleepless night, and—" "Go on, Crow," said Philip in a decisive voice. "I'll see to that, Miss Christian, ma'am," shouted Crow over his shoulder. "His Honour's studying a bit too hard, that's what he is. But a gentleman's not much use if his wife's a widow, as the man said, eh? Looking well enough yourself, though, Miss Christian, ma'am. Getting younger every day, in fact. I'll have to be fetching that East Indie captain up yet. I will that. Ha ha! Get on, Boxer." Then, with a flick of the whip, they were off on their journey. The day was calm and beautiful. Old Barrule wore his yellow skull cap of flowering gorse. The birds sang on the trees, and the sea on the shore sang also with the sound of far-off joy bells. It was a heartbreaking day to Pete, but he tried to bear himself bravely. He was seated between Philip and the driver. On the farther side of Crow there were 2 other passengers, a farmer and a fisherman. The farmer, a foul-mouthed fellow with a long staff and 2 dogs racing and barking on the road, was returning from Midsummer Fair, at which he had sold his sheep. The fisherman, a simple creature, was coming home from the mackerel fishing at Kinsale, with a box of the fish between his legs. "The wife's been having a little one since I was laving in March," said the fisherman, laughing all over his bronze face. "A boy, d'ye say? Aw, another boy, of course. 3 of them now, all men. Got a letter at Ramsey post office coming through. She's getting on as nice, and the old woman's busy doing for her." "Gee, a boxer, we'll wet its head at the Hibernian," said Crow. "I'm not particular at all," said the fisherman cheerily. "The mackerel's been doing middling this season, anyway." And then in his simple way he went on to paint home and the joy of coming back to it, with the new baby and the mother in childbed and the grandmother as housekeeper, and the other children waiting for new frocks and new jackets out of the earnings of the fishing, and himself going round to pay the grocer what had been put on strap while he was at Kinsale, till Pete was melted and could listen no longer. "I'm persuaded still she wasn't well when she went away," he whispered, turning his shoulder to the men and his face to Philip. He talked in a low voice, just above the rumble of the wheels, trying to extenuate Kate's fault and to excuse her to Philip. "It's no use thinking hard of anybody, is it, sir?" he said. "We can't crawl into another person's soul, as the saying is." After that he asked many questions about Kate's illness, about the doctor, about the funeral, about everything except the man. Of him he asked nothing. Philip was compelled to answer. He was like a prisoner chained at the galleys. He was forced to go on. They crossed the bridge over the top of Ballaglass, which goes down to the mill at Caine. "There's the glen, sir," said Pete. "Oh, the dear old days! Wading in the water, leaping over the stones, clambering on the trunks. Aw dear, aw dear! Bareheaded and barefooted in those times, sir, but smart extraordinary, and a terrible notion of being dressy too. Twisting ferns about her lil neck for lace, sticking a mountain thistle, sparkling with dew, on her breast for a diamond, twining a trail of fuchsia round her head for a crown. Aw dear, aw dear! And now, well, well, to think, to think." There was laughter on the other side of the coach. "What d'ye say, Captain Pete?" shouted Crow. "What's that?" asked Pete. The fisherman had treated the driver and the farmer at the Hibernian, and was being rewarded with robustious chaff. "I'm telling Dan Johnny here these childers that's coming when a man's away from home isn't much to trust. Best put a sight up with the lil one to the wise woman of Glen Aldyn, eh? A man doesn't like to bring up a cuckoo in the nest. What d'ye say, Captain?" "I say you're a dirty old devil, Crow, and I don't want to be chucking you off your seat," said Pete. And with that he turned back to Philip. The driver was affronted, but the farmer pacified him by an appeal to his fear. "He'd be coarse to tackle, the same fellow. I saw him clane out a tent with one hand at Tynwald." "It's a wonder she didn't come home for all," said Pete at Philip's ear. "At the end, you know. Couldn't face it out, I suppose. Nothing to be afraid of, though, if she'd only known. I had kept things middling straight up to then, and I'd have broke the head of the first man that had wagged a tongue. But maybe it was myself she was freckened of. Freckened of me. Poor thing, poor thing." Philip was in torment. To witness Pete's simple grief, to hear him breathe a forgiveness for the erring woman, and to be trusted with the thoughts of his heart as a father might be trusted by a young child. It was anguish, it was agony, it was horror. More than once he felt an impulse to cast off his load, to confess, to tell everything. But he reflected that he had no right to do this, that the secret was not his own to give away. His fear restrained him also. He looked into Pete's face, so full of manly sorrow, and shuddered to think of it transformed by rage. "Sit hard, gentlemen. Breeches work here," shouted Crow. They were at the top of the steep descent going down to Laxey. The white town lay sprinkled over the green banks of the glen, and the great water wheel stood in the depths of the mountain gill behind it. "She's there! She's yonder! It's herself at the door! She's up! She's looking out for the coach!" cried the fisherman, clambering up to the seat. "Aisy all!" shouted Crow. "No use, Mr. Crow. Nothing will persuade me but that's herself with the little one in a blanket at the door." Before the coach had drawn up at the bridge, the fisherman had leapt to the ground, shouldered his keg, shouted "Good everin all," and disappeared down an alley of the town. The driver alighted. A crowd gathered around. There were parcels to take up, parcels to set down, and the horses to water. Then the coach was ready to start again. The farmer with the dogs had gone, but there was a passenger for an inside place. It was a girl, a bright young thing, with a comely face and laughing black eyes. She was dressed smartly, after her country fashion, in a hat covered with scarlet poppies, and with a vast brooch at the neck of her bodice. In one hand she carried a huge bunch of sweet-smelling gilvers. A group of girl companions came to see her off, and there was much giggling and chatter and general excitement. "Are you forgetting the pouch and the pipe, Emma?" "Let me see, am I? No, it's here in my frock." "Well, you'll be coming together by the coach at 9, it's like." "It's like we will, Liza, if the steamer isn't late." "Now then, ladies, off the step. Any room for a lil calf in the straw with you, missy? Freckened? Tut, only a lil calf, as clane as clane, and breath as swate as your own, miss. There you are. It'll be lying quiet enough till we get to Douglas. All ready? Ready we are, then. Collar work now, gentlemen. Aise the horse, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Not you, your Honour. Sit where you are, Dempster." End of Part 5, Chapter 21.